when you hear the word mud hut? What do you picture? For many, it's an automatic association with poverty, instability, and primitiveness. It's a term loaded with outdated and often racist stereotypes, painting a picture of homelessness and destruction. In reality, mud huts are incredibly efficient. The thick earthen walls keep the interior cool in summer, like natural air conditioning, and warm in winter. They're built using locally sourced, sustainable materials, making them far better for the environment than modern buildings. Far from destructive, they're historically proven to be durable and sustainable, often lasting for generations. Here is a diagram of how the huts cool and warm the house. Thick earthen walls, thermal mass. During the day, the heavy mud and clay walls absorb the sun's heat like a sponge, which keeps the interior cool. At night, the walls release that stored heat, warming the space when it gets cold outside. Passive ventilation, the stack effect, hot air naturally rises. By placing a vent near the top of the conical thatched roof, the hot air is allowed to escape. This creates a low-pressure area that pulls cooler air in through low-level inlets near the ground, providing constant natural air conditioning. Different cultures globally came to the same realization. Here, take a look at this image representing an ancient Assyrian home. You can see they used mud bricks, working with that same principle of thermal mass to regulate temperature. These thick walls absorbed heat during the brutal day. And it wasn't just them. The Babylonians, Aztecs, early Irish, and countless other groups relied on similar methods, proving that building with the earth is a universal human innovation for staying comfortable, not destructive. African architecture went way beyond basic dome-shaped dwellings. Many dwellings in Africa have 2 or 4 stories homes, complete with multiple rooms, distinct doorways, and expansive windows, far from primitive. It's curious how popular media and history books often focus on the basic dome-shaped mud huts. This selective framing leads us to forget the incredibly advanced, multi-story earthen structures that also existed, presenting a limited, biased view. The real question is, why do we still see overcrowding and poverty in many places? It's a deep dive into a history of imperialism. European empires descended, colonized regions, and systematically stripped away resources, human potential, minerals, everything for their own benefit. This relentless extraction left local economies devastated, and that poverty persists to this day. We're living in the aftermath of being plundered.
Bahrain and others less than 30 years to fix up their country. Why can't we do it in 60 years? While others build infrastructural marvel, we are busy fighting ourselves over what tribe is superior or what version of the foreign religion, Islamic Muhammad or Christianity Jesus, is the correct one. While other nations develop robust educational systems, we are busy complaining about racism and how everyone else hates us. The disrespect towards Black Africans is in many ways self-inflicted. No one can respect people whose cities look like this. It took Japan and Germany less than 30 years to go from the brink of total wipeout to fully developed economies. It took China less than 40 years to eradicate absolute poverty, while it took us less than 20 years to inflict absolute poverty on ourselves. In the 80s, Cameroon, Nigeria, Kenya, Zimbabwe, Gabon, and many other African countries had higher GDP per capita than South Korea, Indonesia, China, and many of the GCC countries. Black Africa has had over 60 years to prove the world wrong. Unfortunately, it has proven the world right by reinforcing existing stereotypes. Of course, disrespect is bound to follow. Only in Black Africa do we see cities devoid of trees, sewage system, pedestrian-friendly pavement, reliable electricity supply, quality buildings, parks, decent roads, hospitals and other emergency services. Yet, no other region has a higher birth rate than Black Africa. What infrastructure and resources are in place for the endless baby production?
And when you look at the continent today, we have leaders who act like puppets, selling out their own people to fatten their pockets and serve the European man. They've bought into the lie that we need Western handouts to survive, perpetuating our own poverty, but there's a different path. Look at Burkina Faso, where President Ibrahim Traoré kicked out the Western powers and chose self-reliance. And guess what? They're building success on their own terms. That's the blueprint for true liberation. The West didn't just come to civilize, they came to harvest. They stripped the earth of its minerals, the people of their dignity, and the continent of its future. They didn't build us up. They built a system to keep us down. Today, we are held back by puppet leaders. These are coons in suits who have sold their souls and their people to fatten their own pockets. They work for the European man, acting as middlemen for our own exploitation. They've been conditioned to believe that Africa can't survive without Western aid, while that very aid is just a leash to keep us obedient. But the tide is shifting. Look at Burkina Faso. President Ibrahim Traoré did what most are too afraid to do. He kicked the Western exploiters out. He told the world that Africa doesn't need to be a beggar at the table of the West. And the results speak for themselves. They are building, they are farming, and they are doing it on their own terms. But look at the cost of that bravery. Traoré has already survived 19 assassination attempts. 19, why? Because a self-sufficient, unified Africa is a nightmare for the Western powers. The Hall of Martyrs. This is the pattern. Every time a lion rises to lead the pride, the hunters come for his head. Thomas Sankara, Burkina Faso, the upright man who was assassinated because he refused to pay colonial debts and started feeding his own people. Patrice Lumumba, Congo. He wanted the Congo's immense mineral wealth to belong to the Congolese. For that, he was murdered and his body dissolved in acid by Western-backed forces. Muammar Gaddafi, Libya, whatever people think of him, he was pushed out the moment he tried to create a gold-backed African currency to break the chains of the CFA franc. And don't think for a second the list stops there. The graveyard of African sovereignty is filled with the bodies of men who dared to say no to the master. Look at Sylvanus Olympio, the first president of Togo. He understood the game. He knew that as long as Togo used the CFA franc currency controlled by France, Togo would never truly be free. He was ready to pull his country out and create an independent national currency. What happened? 3 days before he could sign the papers, he was gunned down in a coup. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a message. Touch our money and we touch your life. Why does this keep happening? Because Africa isn't poor. Africa is being plundered. They want the uranium from Niger to light up the streets of Paris, while the people in Niger live in darkness. They want the gold, the oil, and the cocoa, but they don't want the people. They want the cobalt from the Congo to power the world's green, electric cars, while Congolese children are forced into mines. So when you see those mud huts and you see the poverty, don't let them tell you it's because we are primitive. It is because every time we try to build a skyscraper, they cut the crane. Every time we try to plant a garden, they salt the earth. Every time we find a leader with a backbone, they find a traitor with a gun. We are living in a crime scene, and the suspects are still walking around pretending to be donors and allies. It's time we stopped looking for their approval and started following the blueprint of the martyrs they tried to bury. Because they forgot one thing. Those leaders weren't just men, they were seeds. And a new generation of lions like Traoré is finally starting to grow. My brothers and sisters, the time has come to rise, just as Captain Ibrahim Traoré has shown us. We must not be afraid of the West, for their power only holds us down. Our fight is not with guns, but with knowledge. Let's build our cities and our future with our own hands, creating wealth that lasts for generations. No Western nation destroys their own leaders. They lift themselves up. We must do the same, protecting our progress with strength and wisdom. Let's stop the spread of the propaganda.